So it's all to play for still.
I think so. Do you want to bet against us?
Hello, Aston Villa fans, and welcome to For the Love of Paul McGrath podcast. That is not Paddy, as you can clearly see. I'm joined today by a wonderful Alan from J Soccer Magazine, basically the man who you want to talk to about anything English related in Japanese football. So I'm delighted to have you on, Alan. And you know what the beauty about this is? Alan's a Villa fan as well. So we're going to talk a small bit about how he ended up over that side of the world, his Villa fandom, and then we're also going to talk about Taisei, sorry, I even went through the whole pronunciation with Alan before, and Taisei Miyashiro, I think Miyashiro, yeah, who Aston Villa were linked to it. But Alan, thanks a million for giving me your time. I know you've been doing a lot of travel recently, and the hours and the different time zones and stuff like that. So thank you so much for giving me your time.
Hopefully the pleasure's all yours.
So you run a website and a magazine called J Soccer. I see some of them there in the background for that you have there. Yeah.
Oh, actually, there's the Vissel Kobe on the cover. Actually, I didn't realize it, but sneaky advertising there, but it wasn't intentional. But it's what I've been wearing all day. So, yeah, J Soccer Magazine and jsoccer.com. Thank you.
How did that come about, Alan?
Oh, how long have we got? Football, well, J-League started in 1993. I was here then, so, well, not here because I'm in Thailand, sorry. I was in Japan then 32 years ago now. And I was already writing for Kansai Time Out, which, you know, a bit like Tokyo Time Out, London Time Out, magazines of what to do when you're in the area kind of thing. And I just asked them if I could do a promotion on the J-League and get something going. And they like, do whatever you want to. And I wrote about the fledgling J-League, in fact, before the J-League, about to start, and listed the teams and how to get to their grounds and all that kind of thing. And they let me do something every month, which was great. And probably that was like 32 years ago, about 10 or 12 years ago. Well, then there's a website, probably, I really have no idea, but it must be 20 years at least for the website. And the magazine came about 12 or 13 years ago, and I finally thought, well, let's put something on paper, and then I didn't realize how much it was going to cost. But we'll see. You know. And now it's great though. I mean, I'm loving it. So basically, it's my love of Japanese football, my intention to promote it to the world in English, and now it's promoted to the world in English very nicely. I hope. Thank you. But especially when the magazine came out, it's a lot of Japanese people are very interested in either studying it for a bit of English or just looking at the nice pictures, or seeing the point of view of foreign people, I suppose. I think the first magazine I did, literally the first one, and maybe the second about 12 years ago, I actually tried to do it bilingually at the time, but I realized that it's a magazine. It was once every 3 months. You can get the news, especially now, but even then, you could get the news, the results, everything immediately at your fingertips. So who wants to read something like it's like 2 or 3 months old, or an interview or something like that? So I figured I'd go a bit more deeper and do bigger stories and interviews and histories. And then I thought, well, nobody's really, I mean, they can find that in Japanese anyway. So went to the English, which is, of course, a lot easier for me too. So now it's basically 95% English. I throw in a bit of Japanese sometimes, especially if I can think of some double meaning joke or something that nobody gets in the end anyway.
But that's great. Like, you know, it's to have that as a resource. I would imagine, you know, most of your, or am I just being completely stereotypical for that part of the world? Would most of the viewership, listenership, readership, should I say, would that be based out of the Australian area, or would it be all over the world? The only reason I say that is because you tend to see quite a lot of transfers that side of the world would be, well, actually, maybe not so much anymore, you know, but just the diaspora and stuff like that maybe would be, for English speaking, would be Australian based. Or am I completely off the reservation on that one?
Completely off the reservation. I'm leaving now. I'm out of here.
Your honesty.
Well, it's very interesting. When it first started, I was quite into the stats and finding out where people were checking in from and of course buying it from. I had to stick the label on and send it. So I was quite surprised at first to find literally, I mean, Brazil in particular, but South America, because there are always and always were a lot of Brazilians in the J League, and Japanese people love Brazilian football, and they love, unfortunately, 6th or 7th rate Brazilians in their league. But let's face it, we're not going to get the best or the second best or the third best. But back in 1992, Zico, who was quite, still quite a legend, well, still is a legend in Brazil. Zico came for the opening of the J League, and that sort of blew it up huge. But so South America, there's Americans, Canadians, and Norwegians, Swedish, Finnish, a couple of Russians, some Australians, New Zealand. Yeah, I mean, it's basically all over the world. I'd like to say that they all still buy magazines too, but I don't think nobody really does buy magazines all over the world anymore. But because I can send the PDF for nothing, and I do that too much. I'm such a bad businessman. So, but yeah, I mean, the readership's all over the place, and there's a thing that I'm on that I think you've listened to, and if I may plug it, and he'll be very happy to hear. The J Talk podcast is a thing that's done in English by an Australian, Ben Maxwell. You can find that J Talk podcast. I'm sure you can find it if you want to. And that's very, I mean, he gets people literally, most of them we are Japan based or Japanese overseas and that kind of thing. But that's a weekly thing. And there's a lot of people come on from all over the world. Australians don't tend to, I don't know whether to say the word impress the J League so much. If they're going to get a foreigner, because there's a limited number, as in most of the world, then they go for a Brazilian or at least one of the best Koreans or whatever. And no offense to Australia, but well, certainly the best Australians will be in Europe. But then they don't. I guess the Australians also don't particularly see Japan, or didn't see Japan as a destination. If they could go overseas, then they wanted to go to Europe, of course. So both ways. I'm sure we've had Mitch Langerak, who is the Australian goalkeeper, national team. I would say national team, but he's been out of it for about 5 years for his own reasons, not because he wasn't selected. And he became a legend at Nagoya Grampus, which was Gary Lineker's team in 1993. And we've had a couple of other Australians around, but no, yeah. To tell you we're totally off the reservation, I hoped I've sort of put you clear now.
Was Nagoya Grampus, or was it Grampus 8? Which one was Arsene Wenger's team?
Yes, it was. In those days, it was Nagoya Grampus 8, and about 10 years after that, they just dropped the 8. I guess it was a bit too cumbersome. Although on a lot of their website and ads and badges on T-shirts and things, you can still see the 8. They still have that. And that was, Gary Lineker started there, or rather finished there, shall we say, but started in Japan there. And Arsene Wenger was the manager for a couple of seasons, I believe, before he went to Arsenal. So he went downhill after Japan.
Well, yeah. Well, do you know what? There's still a lot of clubs would take him, even though he is 95 at this stage. I don't know. Well, not being ageist, you know, he's still he changed the game of football. If you want to believe that, he absolutely did. But anyway, less of the Arsene Wenger talk and more of the, I suppose, talk about the J League. And Aston Villa have been linked to Taisei Miyashiro from Kobe, and obviously Kobe have been on a great run. Aston Villa are in an agreement with Kobe as well. They've won J League for 2 years in a row. Talk to me, I suppose, firstly about the club itself, if you could, before we go into Taisei, and talk a small bit about him, because a lot of people will know this club. And Andres Iniesta has played with them in recent times. Am I right in saying, did Fernando Torres play with them in recent times as well, or have I got that one wrong?
It's off the reservation again. He was at Sagan Tosu. He was there. Yes. Yeah. I've had a few. Well, Vissel Kobe formed in 1995, 2 years after the forming of the J League. It's a long and complicated story, because literally on the day that Vissel Kobe began training was the Great Hanshin earthquake. Literally, it's 40 years ago next week. 30 years, not that old. 30 years ago next week. Literally the day that Vissel Kobe began their league career. Actually in the JFL, which was what we'd say is it the Southern League still in England, the fifth tier. J League started with only 10 teams and then became 12, and in 1995 they had a JFL, which was going to start sending teams up to the J League, and eventually we had a J2 and then a J3. Almost 50 professional teams in Japan now, but I digress. So Vissel Kobe, basically 1995, opening day, crash, 6,000 people died. There were buildings falling over everywhere, and basically, the season was ending before it began for not just for Vissel Kobe, but for many, many people. I was there and severely affected, and so they managed to train elsewhere, and they lost the sponsorship. I mean, the main sponsors were all based in Kobe, and of course they had better things to do with their money. But they managed to muddle through and find places to train, and they managed to I think the second year of their existence, they managed to get a promotion to the J League. A nice aside on the manager of Aston Villa in 1995 was a man from Birmingham, from Dudley, called Stuart Baxter, who played for Celtic, and I believe either he or his father were on Villa's books, but not necessarily playing so much. But Stuart Baxter, he's still around, must be about 70 plus now, and was managing in Australia and Sweden and South Africa very successfully. But in 95, he was managing in the J League, and it was excellent for me because I was a qualified referee, still am, but a bit older. And I just about maybe the third or fourth week in there, I was sent to the Villa game, the Vissel game to referee. And so I already knew the manager, but I surprised him by turning up as a referee. And I did well. He loved it. And after that, it was basically every Wednesday practice games. I was a referee for Vissel Kobe for a year or two. As an off thing again, I managed to keep going and referee J League practice games for about another 20 years. So I've got a lot of friends and enemies inside various teams. And last January now, a year ago this week, I refereed a retirement game for one of the players I know quite well. And so it was like the all stars against the comedians of the TV and whatever, which was great. All superstars. And it's always been a pleasure. So Vissel Kobe started in 1995, managed to get into the J League, started 96, 97. Michael Laudrup played for Vissel Kobe.
Yes.
And a couple of other foreign players that had come in to boost the team a little bit. And they were wearing very cool black and white stripes, which was very nice. And 1999, 2000, 2001, money problems came along, and they actually almost, well, I guess technically they went bankrupt 2000, I think. And the current owner, Mr. Hiroshi Mikitani, who owns Rakuten, known the world over, I believe, but he's got the front of the shirts. He came in, took over the team. They changed to what they call Crimson, but I'll call Claret for our purposes. And because he's an alumni of Harvard University, which is a Crimson University. Yes. So he rechristened the team, or at least recolored the team, and struggled in 2000 or so. That started to bring in. It would be a bit like I'm trying to think of age-wise, so I can't. But he brought in about 6, 7, 8. I was still refereeing at this time as well, so I really got to know these legends of the game. But shall we say 32, 33, 34, 35-year-old legends of the game, or former legends of the game. So, in fact, he also signed Ilhan Mansiz just after the World Cup. He'd just played for Turkey and done extremely well. Came over here, promptly screwed his knee up and hardly played a full game. Yeah. Total waste of money, shall we say, but he raised the level of the name of the team around the world, especially in Turkey. And he's gradually, well, shall we say, he's done less and less. He was very much hands-on, and 20 plus years ago now, and literally in the last 4 or 5 years, his businesses have got so diverse and in some parts of them so worrisome and money losing, or shall we say money loss leading, that he's concentrated on the business. He's let the manager do the job, and we have 2 Emperor's Cups and 2 leagues. So I think that says it all. And probably a lot of your listeners of Villa and otherwise will be thinking that about their owners. Leave it to the manager.
Exactly. Yeah, and Vissel Kobe obviously have a connection with Aston Villa. There's an agreement. When it was reported here in like, obviously when we hear of agreements here in the UK, it's almost like, I think it was reported as a strategic agreement, if I'm not mistaken. What way is that seen in Japan? Because literally it was announced and then there was nothing ever said of it again, actually, ever here in European media or British media. What way was it kind of seen? What way was it taken in in Japan? And was there a lot of was there excitement about forming a partnership with a Premier League team?
It's the first I've heard of it. No, no, the Japanese clubs do a lot of this. Even down second and third tier, we'll go and find a Belgium second tier team for that, perhaps, and get together and sign things. Basically, it's as you said, strategic, and they call it a memorandum of agreement in Japan. And it's ideally exchange of ideas, exchange of coaching. Coaches come and visit, not the manager, but they call it the coach. Maybe even the medical teams. And some youth players will go and train. And as we'll get to later, I believe that Miyashiro did get in, although I don't think it was official, but I think Miyashiro visited Villa Park or Bodymore Heath. It's still Bodymore Heath, is it?
Still Bodymore, yeah.
Okay, it's been a while. So the idea basically would be either officially or unofficially, 3 or 4 youth players from each team can exchange and get to know things. And the maybe director of football or his staff will visit Villa. And perhaps Villa people will visit Japan, which I'm looking forward to. I haven't seen any yet, but it was like remind me to talk about Aston Villa in 1998 because got some good stuff there too. Make a note. Yes, I don't think it's a big thing, but it's sort of let's hope it works. So let's give it a try idea, and hopefully if Miyashiro does get to go over there, I hope it will be a huge success. I presume it will be some kind of loan, as opposed to, for example, Kaoru Mitoma at Brighton, who is tearing up the Premier League now. Yeah. I think he signed over 2 years ago, but in those days he couldn't get a working visa anyway, so was lent out to Belgium, the Brighton owners' other team, and then he came back and he's done well. But now they've changed the rules in. I was going to say the Premier League, but in England they've changed the rules, I believe, to allow 4 non-qualifying players, depending on how many youth players and homegrown players you've got, etc. Right? Yeah. So, dare I mention it? But Birmingham City have 3. I've had 3 Japanese players, which has been very irksome to me because I will now go back to 1998. I introduced Aston Villa as a Japanese player, and I told so many players about Aston Villa, and one of the players that I'm really pushed Aston Villa ended up at West Bromwich Albion, so that was even worse. Okay. But and so I'm really hoping that even if it is a loan of 6 months and he's in the reserves or on the bench, even it would be very nice to have the connection, and I'll be at Villa Park as soon as I can.
Absolutely. It wasn't Junichi Inamoto by any chance, was it? I think he was of that vintage.
That's right. Junichi Inamoto managed to get to West Bromwich. In fact, I told him all about Aston Villa and I chummed them up, and then he went to West Bromwich, and he went to Fulham, then he ended up at West Bromwich, and then he came back to actually Bangkok. I met him again in Bangkok in 2005 when North Korea had to play their home game in a neutral venue to qualify for the World Cup.
Yes.
And it ended up being Thailand. Any excuse, there I was. So with my little press pass, so I managed to see the game. And after the game, I spoke to Inamoto and I was like, so you speak English now, right? And he said, you, Villa fan, I'm not talking to you. Which was very good.
He only retired, I think, a couple of weeks ago. I think he was still playing up until he must be about 45. Because I remember reading something that he just retired and I went, gosh, he was on the go a while.
Yeah, he's there's a team in I would say the 1, 2, 3, 4, probably the 6th tier of Japanese football, but they're based around the very, very famous worldwide animation cartoon called Captain Tsubasa. They are the club that he played for in the books, and now this club exists. It's called Nankatsu, and they've got a big sponsor, or 2 or 3, I'm not sure. They've got a good budget, and they've managed to get some very well-known veterans to play with the kids, like Inamoto, and there's 5 or 6 other 38, 39-year-olds at least who are playing there and playing very well. So Inamoto literally only retired at the end of this season, so December, which is a nice aside there. But yeah, it's very cool. In fact, I also remember when I was I've done they call it stadium DJ in Japan, but announcing, pre-game announcing and that kind of thing. And I've been on the TV screen where they ask me, so what do you think of today's game? Kyo no shiai wa nan to omoimasu ka? And I remember the first game I ever did. I was so nervous about this, and my Japanese was and still is pretty average, But as long as I knew what the question was in advance, so I actually spoke to the manager. And I said, tell me something that's going to happen today. And he said, Inamoto is going to be playing a key role for probably the first time at Gamba Osaka. So I came in and like, yes. So all I think today, I think Inamoto deserves a chance, and I think he could be a. and of course it happened, and I was quite pleased about that. So
yeah,
I have a soft spot for Inamoto.
Good, excellent. Taisei, talk to us about him. So, if I'm not mistaken, he only signed for the club last year, but he's had a meaningful impact for Kobe. Talk to us, I suppose, about him as a player and how he fit into that Kobe team.
We started very well at Kawasaki Frontale while they were winning championships, but he wasn't getting in the team, and he was loaned out to a couple of smaller teams, and scored a few goals in the lower J1 or even in J2. Came back to Frontale and didn't play again. Came to Vissel Kobe and managed to get injured. So we still weren't sure how good he was, and if he was going to do anything. And I had this feeling he was going to be one of these injury-prone Robin van Persie's or something that gets. Although let's hope he's good. But someone who only plays like a quarter of the games, but really makes some kind of impact. But towards the end, certainly the end of the season, but I think Vissel Kobe have 3 solid forwards. And if they play 4-4-2, for example, the 2 solid forwards are the guys who get the place. And then Miyashiro was sort of a left attacking midfield or left of a 3 in a 4-3-3. And Vissel Kobe literally have 4 or 5 players that can play in that position. So even then he was fighting off other players to get the position, but he was creating and scoring. And I think in the end, all 3 of the forwards got about 11 to 13 goals each. And also 7 or 8 assists each. Hate that word, but that's what it's called now, right? So all 3 of them had a solid impact of being involved in 20 goals each through the whole season. So he definitely earned his stripes, and he scored some very important goals and scored one in the last game where Vissel Kobe won the championship. Although in the end, the other team that we were concerned about didn't win their game, and Vissel Kobe won easily, so the gap was there. But at the end of the last day of the season, 3 teams could have won the championship. But in the end, Vissel Kobe settled it by 2-0 at half-time. In fact, he scored a wonderful goal that was disallowed by the dreaded VAR, but correctly so. So he'd already been on the score sheet before he managed to score his goal proper. So he's done very well. He's established himself, and as I said to you in the green room, if I can bring it up now, back in August or so, when the memorandum of agreement was announced, he actually did a small video on the Vissel Kobe website, which might still be available in Japanese, where they asked him him and another player, how much they knew about Aston Villa, their new agreement. He didn't even know what colours they were wearing and all that kind of stuff. So I had to, the next game, I'd got my Villa hat on and a Villa shirt underneath my thing. And I was like, hey, come over here. Oh, I should add that I'm a member, well, obviously, I'm a member of the media and I can access the players after the games. And I live in Kobe. So that's the main team that I do see. So I managed to speak to Miyashiro. Let's call him Taisei. I'm sure that will be on the back of his shirt if it's anything. Taisei sounds better than Miyashiro. And I asked him about Aston Villa. And I showed him I'd got my Aston Villa cap with a Vissel Kobe badge and an Aston Villa badge. And in fact, there's a few pictures all over me. In fact, last year and this year, last season final game and this season final game, I was wearing the lucky Aston Villa hat for the championship games too. So I've spoken to Miyashiro twice at least specifically about Aston Villa and the fact that he should go there. So and I was only half joking at the time. So the fact that this last week or so suddenly it came up, Miyashiro, Aston Villa, I was like, hooray! I was quite excited about that. The sad thing, I'm not going to say, is that I'm away. I'm in Bangkok, so
Yeah.
otherwise I'd have been tracking him down. I know where he lives. Even if I can't find him, I'd be knocking on the door or just hanging around outside.
Yeah.
And I'd be asking about it. But yeah, I think it'll be nice. I think he would give 100% whatever he goes. And I mean, I've just seen a couple of Aston Villa games recently where they seem to have plenty of players, and I'm not sure how good he is and how much he'll fit in, and if it is a strategic agreement loan, whether our manager will even give him a chance. But it'll be very nice to see, and you never know what might happen. So I believe that he's good enough for a lower Premier League team for sure. But the good fact is that Aston Villa have a good squad, a deep squad in most positions. He can play anywhere in the top three. He can play centre forward, right wing, left wing, even in the hole behind the striker. So there's plenty of options for him. But from what I can see, also Villa have plenty of options too, which is good news, of course. So I have high hopes, but
they might have won less now because it seems the Jed and Philogene Bidace might be on his way, but it looks like they might be bringing in reinforcements in the shape of Daniel Malin as well. But I think one of the biggest things that intrigues me about this player are that a lot of people will look at. First of all, I'll go to his age. I think he's 24. He's not been capped by Japan. He's not played outside the J League. Is that a concern? Because I think a lot of Japanese players that would move to, because there has been an influx of them onto even continental Europe, into Belgium, into Germany in the last 3 or 4 years, and they've all moved kind of at the similar age. Am I right in saying that there's a college kind of system as well in Japan where a lot of players will play football in college and can be spotted from there, then they go into the J League and then might make their way to Europe? Or is 24 considered old to move to Europe?
No, I think 24 is a perfect age, to be honest. The Japanese system is such that, well, I remember 16-year-old Wayne Rooney, whatever, straight from school, or if I go back to Aston Villa 40 years ago, even there's plenty of players that have come straight from school. They've worked their way up. They clean the boots of the professionals and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if they still do that, but the fact is that in Japan, players will play for clubs at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. They'll have been signed, and then they'll be almost encouraged to go to university, just in case, or for the fact that the university league is quite strong. All the university teams are a bit like the non-league teams in the FA Cup in England. The university teams are entering the Japanese FA Cup, called the Emperor's Cup. There's a chance they play against better teams than themselves, and some of them make it to the last 16, the last 32 or so. So there's a very good league, and once they're playing in university, it means that they're not sitting on some bench or worse in a Premier League, a J League team. So players that do go to university are often signed to a J League club, especially whenever they're good enough, but usually in their 3rd or 4th year, university 4 years as usual. And they come as a special designated player and are allowed to play for the J League team if they wanted to. Funny thing there is that when they play the Emperor's Cup, they're supposed to play for their own university team. So if they ever get to play in the Emperor's Cup, especially against their own team, even which has happened in the past. So players come out of university at 22, but they have played solid football for 4 years, and some of them will return to the team that they started with when they were 10 or 12 or 14. Others will have been released by a team and then elect to go to university, or in some cases are scouted by the universities, scholarship-wise, or just come and play football for us, and you may make the J League again. And in fact, I just interviewed one player, actually my assistant, my photographer. Sorry, I called you an assistant, Lionel. My partner in crime, Lionel Piguet, credit there. My photographer is Swiss, and he traveled back to Switzerland to meet a Japanese player who was actually released by Yokohama F. Marinos when he was 16 or 17, finished his high school, was scouted. Literally, the university manager of the football team said, "Come with us, we'll make you better." And he did 4 years, and then he came out of university, went into Kashima Antlers, top right back for Kashima Antlers, who are a very strong team historically, and moved to Switzerland within a year. And he's in Switzerland for 2 years now already and doing very well. So the university works. Obviously, there are players that some people are desperate to take when they're 18 or even 16. There's a kid in Spain now called Takefusa Kubo.
Yes, yeah, with Sociedad.
Yeah, Real Sociedad, and I can claim that when he was 9 and 10 years old, I found a video of his, and I put it on the web. Then it's probably still there somewhere, saying that this kid is amazing. Watch him go, and he did. But Barcelona took him when he was 12, I think, or so, and he was there for 3 or 4 years. Speaks absolutely fluent Spanish. Interviews in Spanish, and it's quite amazing to see. But then he had to return because of certain rules around the world, in fact, but certainly in Spain, it was decided that Barcelona had illegally taken him away from his family, etc., etc. So he came back to Japan for 2 years. Ange Postecoglou, now of Spurs, basically threw him straight into the team when he was about 16 and a half, 17, gave him a chance. Spurs fans, be patient, it will happen. And he played for 2 years before he went back, ironically, to Real Madrid. He went back to Madrid. And then he was loaned out to Sociedad, and he's kept. I think he's still on loan from Real Madrid, but he's in the national team, and he's been around forever. And I think he's 21. I think amazing player. So certain players. Wow, that was a long digression. Sorry, but certain players will be grabbed, but most of them are actually encouraged to finish high school at least. Go to university. Sometimes the third year they'll pull them out and say. But the captain of the Japan national team in 2006 is another story if I digress again. He was and still is probably my best friend in Japanese football because he spoke very good English when he was 17 and I didn't speak any Japanese whatsoever. So he was the only guy I ever spoke to. And we became very good friends. And he was the captain of the Japan national team while he was still at university. So he was playing for Gamba Osaka, but he decided that he wanted to finish his degree too. So finally, he actually graduated from university at 26 because he was so busy in football. That guy is now the chairman of the Football Association. So amazing stuff. So So yes, we have a burgeoning, a good system of things that encourage people to stay at university, certainly finish high school, and in some circumstances, if they're good enough, do university and soccer at the same time.
I love that. It seems archetypically, stereotypically Japanese, really, to kind of have such a rounded kind of view towards something like that get your education and it will still be here. And we like to say that here in Ireland with some sports we have here, specifically things like rugby or professional soccer or football isn't to that standard, but definitely in the UK it's like get your education first and football will always be there. You're kind of seen as I suppose washed up if you haven't come through the system by 22, 23. Obviously there are those people like Jamie Vardy and those that do buck the trend in the system and stuff like that, but it seems like I like that system to give solidity and foundation, I suppose, to players prior to coming out, so that they don't so that they have a foundation if football doesn't go their way. Going back to Taisei there for a moment as well, you mentioned that he'll give 100%. Like, once again, I'm going to say that's all that, like, people in the UK almost think that of a stereotype. You see the Japanese player come and he will run forever. He will run around and he will not give up, and he won't throw a tantrum. He won't throw a strop. He'll be very kind of emotionally level and stuff like that. With regards to his technical ability, Taisei, it did, like, obviously to score that amount of goals in the J League that he did last year and to fend off players. How would you rate his technical ability?
I think his finishing is Lineker-esque. Did I say that? And I would like to say I would compare him to someone like Gary Shaw.
Okay.
to go way back. He wasn't a big guy. He didn't push people around. And as far as I can remember about Gary, he didn't do a lot of dribbling, but he was there when the ball came. He held people off. He gave the ball back. He finished if it was there. I'd have gone for Peter With, but he was more of a centre forward, and he's stronger, much stronger. And of course, I'm giving away my vintage here too, which we can talk about later if you wish. But Gary Shaw, Chris Sutton.
Sorry, the reason I ask is because every time I see him, he's able obviously to get the ball and create things, but I always see him on the end of things, whenever. And look, I've seen, obviously, my research has been 100%, 100% steadfast because I've watched a YouTube video or two of him. So that means I've seen everything, and I need to know about him, obviously, as we know. But he always seems to be on the end of stuff. That's what I like. He's this real knack. He does so much with inside the box for a wing player that I was really intrigued by that he was able to start up the play. He was never really the fellow who was crossing the ball in much. Like, he wasn't your wide European winger that would hug the touchline, cross the ball in. He'd start it off, he'd give it to an overlapping fullback, and then you just see him make a byline for the penalty spot. And he'd always be the guy who gets on the end of the ball. And I was like, that is really interesting, because stuff like that seems to get taught out of players nearly in English football, to an extent. The late run to the back post or the late run to the front post. And he seemed like he was really good at it, because a lot of his goals came from inside the box, if not all of them, I think, that I saw.
Yeah, I can't remember him hitting a 20-yard half volley off the bar, to be honest. He's predatory, isn't that? Lineker, Shaw, etc. He's not your Dalian Atkinson or Peter With. I think the fact that Vissel Kobe playing a 4-3-3, but the interesting thing is that they usually go for those three players up front are rotating everywhere, and they've still got the left winger, or the left midfield player and the right midfield player are basically the wingers. So there are two of the three up front for Aston Villa, for Vissel Kobe, Miyashiro and a guy called Muto, who played for Newcastle for a short time and in Germany for 4 or 5 years. And they're not wingers, but they are there creating on the back, but then laying it back to the guy behind them who's coming up, and then they're in the box. So both of them. And then they have a centre forward, Osako, who is probably the only player in Japan, I feel, that basically the ball comes to him on the halfway line and he's got his back to the goal, and he'll hold it while 4 people go somewhere else and the space is created. And then he's around the back, and he's a centre forward, but he's behind 3 players quite often. But then he's in there to finish it too. So Vissel have 3 of those kind of players that will create in the halfway line and then be there at the end, because they have this, the fullbacks can attack, but then the 2 wide midfield players are also attacking. Sometimes you even see one of the centre backs is up there, but it's not necessarily just Vissel, but Vissel do a lot of attacking. But Ange Postecoglou's playing for Spurs now, and he did it for Celtic with 4 Japanese players, which was a help. But the way he did that in Japan, people seem to think that he brought that to Japan. But Japanese players have been playing like this for probably 20 years. Where I remember watching in early mid 2000s, a team in particular, Sanfrecce Hiroshima and Gamba Osaka, I mentioned again, that probably played 3-6-1, and those 3 players, there's only 3 backs there, right? But those 2 are still playing on the wing. And when they go up, the 2 central midfielders come back and cover that. And then one of these guys is up there. And so this guy covers it. And you end up with the left wing player playing it right back if they lose the ball. Automatically. It's like it's instilled into Japanese
fluidity of it's almost zonal positioning as opposed to, it's like, is there anybody in that zone? No, we'll get into that zone, somebody, and cover that zone.
And that's the way Miyashiro has been taught, or to play. So I don't know whether it'll fit in at Villa. But...
Well, I actually think it will, because you're painting a decent picture there, a really decent picture. Because one of Villa's biggest problems are, number one is when the ball goes up to someone like Ollie Watkins or John Duran, they can get isolated very quickly. There's not a ton of pace within this Villa team. Hence the links to, like, we've got Leon Bailey and so on, but hence the links to Daniel Malin and potentially this guy if he does come in. I don't know will he ever crack the first team. But the fluidity amongst that front 3 is really interesting, or the 3 behind Ollie Watkins or John Duran is really interesting. Because we've seen it happen before. But it's been more rigid with Bailey only playing on the right-hand side. We've been crying out for somebody to give him a go on the left-hand side. But there has been interchangeability between John McGinn and Morgan Rogers. It's basically whoever's out of that whoever's in the center, the other person goes out to the left. Whoever's on the left, the other person goes into the center, and so on. And I feel that Unai Emery wants that. And I feel he also wants to create a bit more pace around Ollie Watkins and John Duran. So the interesting part there is Watkins is pretty good at holding up the ball, but we take forever to get to him. And it usually is Luca Dean on the left-hand side, who ain't an Olympic sprinter, that's for sure. But he's been one of our best players. So it seems interesting here to me that if somebody like this, or of this type of player, was to come in, he's used to playing in around that kind of the fluid front three or behind that striker or playing off a central striker. That something like that could work for Aston Villa. Now, once again, prefacing this with, there's the likelihood of him of this transfer and him actually cracking the first team. We don't know what it is, but Unai Emery does have a habit of plucking a player that maybe somebody has given up on or hasn't seen and making the most of him, a la Morgan Rogers, a la John Duran was in the pipelines prior to Emery coming in, but it's it would be interesting from that point of view. So that's a nice picture that you paint. We also spoke in the green room beforehand about everywhere I look. So you mentioned it could be a loan. Everywhere I look, his contract is up on the 31st of January. Now, everywhere I look, two sources. To me, his contract is up on the 31st of January. And I don't know how easily accessible contract lengths and what level of publicity that they would have. Is it common for players to only have 1 year contracts in the J League, specifically, even for a top team like this, and for them not to negotiate a contract mid-season with somebody who scored, 13 goals for a club that went on to win the league?
The agents are strong here. The contracts are usually pushed by the agents to allow their agents to move their players for free as often as they can, which is not what I believe an agent should do. But it happens. The unfortunate part is that it also happens that certain players either get injured or just run out of form at the end of a season, then they don't get another contract. So it's rare that it's given, or it's rare that it's publicized. Usually the teams just say this player is contracted. They don't say 3 years or 4 years or 1 year. So often it is 1 year, and it ends on January the 31st, which is a different point to discuss in a moment. But I've noticed that the clubs tend to like to announce certainly they're good players. They're here again for next season, even though maybe they had a 3 year contract, but they don't another season with Taisei Miyashiro, and so it's something that the clubs can get more traction out of on their social media. The interesting part here, in particular for this one, is that the contract ends on the 31st, but the transfer window in Europe also ends on the 31st, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So the reason
this is why I asked the question.
The reason we have contracts ending on January the 31st in Japan now, even though that's 6 or 7 weeks after the Japanese season ends, and in fact, most of the teams are starting their preseason training this week or next week. Most of their players are still on contracts from last season because Japanese players, when Europe and other countries started realizing that Japanese players were that good and that free, the contracts were ending at the end of the season. And then they had this sort of unwritten rule that if they weren't offered a new contract within 10 days of the end of a season, they could talk to anybody they wanted. But they weren't allowed to talk to anybody they wanted until at least 7 days after the end of the season, because the club would offer them. And then we had this. There's a guy called Shinji Okazaki, who played for Leicester City and won a championship.
Yes.
Played very well, did very well, became quite a legend there. When he moved overseas the first time, he went to Mainz in Germany.
Yes,
and they thought they were getting a free player, January the 31st. But even with especially with the 8 hours or 7 hours behind, it meant that the Japanese contract was still in force on the 1st of February. And so on the 1st of February, they were hoping to sign him for free, but they couldn't then, because either he had to have a contract or they couldn't sign him on the 1st of February, right? Because the transfer window was closed. So in the end, the player that they were hoping to get for free, they paid €1 million for. And that sort of created a bit of a precedent where all the agents and the teams realized that, January 31st, this needs to be the contract. And now, no offense to the boys at Transfermarkt, who I know quite well, or some of them, but they tend to just presume that contracts are 1 year, January 31st. So unless it's announced officially or they find somewhere, they'll just say that anyway. And usually they're right, but sometimes they're not. So that's why January 31st. But in this case, because it's a memorandum of agreement and it's a loan, there won't be a fee unless he signs before the end of January 31st. And I'm sure Vissel Kobe won't stand in his way, and but they will also be looking for a player to at least loan from Aston Villa, or perhaps bring one in return too.
And how beneficial how beneficial, just on that point there, how beneficial do you think it would be for Aston Villa to let, I'm going to pluck a name, Caden Young, go for a year to play? Do you think he'd be able to assimilate a player coming from what I would consider sometimes the rigidity of academy football in the UK to at a young age to Kobe, playing in a team that's just won the J League? Like, would you think that there would be reticence from Aston Villa's point of view to send somebody that way, because they might go, this guy might be halfway across the world and only get 4 games? What would be the assimilation like, do you think?
It's true, because I mean, certainly the top 6 or 7 J1 teams could probably hold their own in the Premier League. I think certainly in the lower half. You know, put Vissel Kobe, Sanfrecce Hiroshima, Yokohama Marinos, Kashmir Antlers, Urawa Reds, when they're on form, against Southampton. I was going to say Nottingham Forest, but they're up in the top 4, aren't they? But you know, Southampton, Watford, Wolves, etc., Crystal Palace. I don't think. I think Vissel Kobe could come mid-table in a Premier League. So the fact is that he might not necessarily play because he's not good enough or doesn't fit the system, as opposed to the fact that he's just so far overseas and might not fit in, or they might not think he's a foreigner or he's an overseas, an outsider. I think it would be very beneficial to a young player in particular who wants to learn to come over. Ideally, perhaps 2 players who come together, so you know there's less loneliness and homesickness. Even if the second player is less of a player but is willing to go there and learn and experience another culture, etc. So I'd love to see it. I mean, I've had my time at Villa, with Villa for 1993. But let's go into that one as well later. Sorry, when I spent a week with them.
you can chat about it now. Because I've only got one more question, I suppose, based on the J League afterwards. But yeah, go for it. You're a Villa fan.
Well, don't forget your question.
I won't. No, I won't.
Yeah, well, it was a dream. Well, 1970, and many of your listeners, or most people around the world, certainly in the civilized countries of football, will possibly not understand what I'm going to say now, but in 1970, 71, even 69, my dad took me to the Blues. My first hero was Trevor Francis. But having said that, everyone else in the road was Villa. It was incredible. I would go to Blues with my dad, and then I would the next week, because in those days it was quite logical. Liverpool and Everton played home and away, at Manchester United, Man City, etc. Villa and Blues never played a home game at the same time. I don't know if it's still that way. So I got to see Villa and Blues equally, and it was so much more fun at Villa, because I went in the back of a window cleaning van. You know, we didn't need seatbelts in those days. We were just in the back of a van that had been emptied of all the ladders and the buckets, and we were rolling around in the back of a van. 10 of us went down to Villa Park, and then and there was about 3 or 4 vans. I mean, there was loads of it. This particular family who ran the window cleaning business, grandfather Bullivant, if anybody's listening, it's a Villa podcast. The chances are they're out there. Yes. He had 9 children. Grandfather Bullivant had 9 kids. All stayed within a mile of each other. Yeah. All had 3, 4, 5 kids each.
Okay.
So imagine we're down to the 3rd generation, and there's like 30 or 40 kids in or around my age, all going to the Villa. And so I was watching Birmingham half the time and Villa there the second time, and but it was always soft spot for Villa. 1971 League Cup final, we won that. Sorry, too old for most people. Norwich City, that was 1971. I had a season ticket when Villa were in the 3rd division. I sat on the field. I think it was Aston Villa against Bournemouth in the 3rd division, when there were about 50,000 people in the stadium. Okay. Bournemouth wore red and black stripes. I remember that, and there were so many people that the kids, so youngsters, we were brought out of the Holt, and we were sitting around the track during the game. We were on the track. Incredible atmosphere. 50,000 people in a Division 3 game. So that's one of my memories. So it was definitely, I edged certainly towards Aston Villa. And then I left the country in 1983. Gee, 42 years ago.
Yeah.
I was a DJ, and I got an offer for a company that sent DJs around the world. And I went to Norway, then I went to Bangkok. Here I am again. Egypt, Hawaii, Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, Korea, Australia, 3 tours of Australia. I mean, I was everywhere for about 5 years, traveling the world as a DJ, staying in the best hotels, not like this one. And I went to Japan for 1 month in 1988, and I met this lady on the first night I was in Japan. And 32 years later, we're still married. 32 years, but we've been married. And I just got stuck there, you know. So that's when the J League was about to start. Whenever I arrived in a country, I did 4 or 6 months. I looked for a team to play for. I looked for a team to support. I watched football. I played football desperately. And I got to Japan, and it was pre-J League, so I found a local team that was in the next city, actually. It's a bit like traveling to Coventry to watch my team, you know. And so that was quite amazing. And then when the J League started, they had this big thing. They called it the Coca-Cola Cup, coincidentally, because we also had one there then. Coca-Cola were big sponsors. And 1993, June, Aston Villa were the invitees. So I sent, wait for it, I sent a telex.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, I sent a contact to Aston Villa. I had a contact at Aston Villa called Steve Stride, who was the secretary for many, many years. And he passed it on to the right people, I guess, because I literally had a phone call from Ron Atkinson. Hello, mate. This is Ron Atkinson here. Hey, I'll smash her. No, that was the other guys, wasn't it? And so Ron phoned me up, big Ron, and said, "Tell us about this team." And so I gave him the rundown on the team, and then he said, "You going to the game, right?" I said, "Of course I am. Meet us in the hotel." And so, you know, it's about 6 o'clock one morning. I arrived at the hotel after an overnight bus, and Sid Cowans was sitting in reception, couldn't sleep. So I got to speak to Sid Cowans for about an hour, and then all the other players sort of gradually came down for breakfast, and I spent 4 days with Villa. I was in the team bus. I was in the dressing room. I was in the changing room. I was in the press conference. I took penalties against Mark Bosnich.
Oh, wow.
I was ball boy for the training. It was pretty cool. But sitting in the team bus, I had a great Ron Atkinson story that I can't really repeat. But he did, for want of a better word, get found out later, as we know. But he got on this bus, team bus, and I'm sitting. Earl Barrett's here, Tony Daly, Daly and Atkinson, Dwight York's at the back with his headphones on. Dwight York, there's so many. And he just walks on the bus. He says, "Hey, guys, I've got this joke. This N-word gets into a pub."
Oh, God. Jesus.
And he told the joke, and everybody politely laughed, you know. So, but yeah, so it wasn't a one-off, shall we say. And Dwight York in particular was at the back going,
yeah.
But yeah, it was very cool to be with Villa. And they did the game in the Tokyo Dome, which was actually a baseball stadium.
A big wrestling stadium at the moment as well, if I'm not mistaken, in Japan.
Yeah, they do all sorts of things there, concerts too. But the Dome was like indoors, and AstroTurf and sand, you know, baseball field basically. So they bought in and laid a football field, and I walked on the pitch, kicked the ball a bit on the pitch, and it was okay, you know. But man, it smelled bad because it was manured where it was. So it came into the closed dome. It whiffed a bit, I'll tell you. But so 50,000 people came to see Villa, and I met some of the most famous Japanese players of the time. I met them for the first time in 1993 because the opposition was Yomiuri Verdy, and they won the championship for the first 2 years, and they had some amazing players. They had a player called Kazuyoshi Miura, who is still playing at 57.
Yes. Is he that? Yeah, he's the famous guy that's never going to hang him up. They're going to take him out of.
No, he's like me. He's going to die on a football pitch, I think, because I'm older than Kazu, and I play 3 or 4 times a week with people half my age, and I don't let them see any weakness. You know, they think I'm a Iron Man. After the game, they don't see me walking around. But during the game, they think I'm incredible, and I won't let it stop. And Kazu, I guess Kazu doesn't play as often as me, to be honest, but he trains. Yeah. He trains hard. He has a nutritionist. He has masseurs. He has his own doctors. I mean, he really wants to keep playing. Yeah. But he's more of a. I hesitate to say it because he really is a professional in every way. But he's more of a shirt seller now. Or come and watch this team and hope that he might get 10 minutes because people just love him. But back in that day, I think he was about 27, 28, just hitting his peak. And I often joke because I get the BBC and CNN call me like literally almost every year when he signs a new contract. Tell us about the oldest player in the world, you know? And I say, well, I remember when he was ready to retire at 38. So that was 20 years ago. I refereed him. I tell you what, I refereed him many times actually in his Vissel Kobe days. And he actually told me that I was, I'll translate his Japanese, but he said I was the best referee he'd ever had. I seem to understand the game much more than anyone. And I say it now to people, and I'm sure again your listeners, we digress from Villa now, but I've taught referees here, and I've learned from or tried to learn from referees here. I know most of the J League referees. I never got to play referee J League because I hit the age limit just when they decided there was an age limit. Then when they removed the age limit, I was at the next age limit.
No, go away.
But I still got paid nicely to referee practice games pretty much every Wednesday for some team or other. Yeah. But Kazu was amazing, and he was really nice to tell me that. And I think I have to agree with him that referees know the laws of the game very well. They know the rules. They know the law. They don't know the game, right? They don't know.
There's a good. If my co-host, I know that's the chat here, Rich, and my co-host was here. He's the most anti-referee person you've ever met in your life. So he might take umbrage to that the referees know the laws of the game, but I don't.
Well, I think they do. I think they do know the laws, but they just don't know how to apply them and how to bend them a little and how to. But they don't know how to play. You see, that's the key. So they don't know what's an accident, what isn't an accident. And now I'm talking about my referee now. Sorry, but what I would see was I can see the trouble before it happens, and speak to the player as an aside and say, "I've got my eye on you. Keep it." Yeah. You know. Referees here, they don't care. It's like they want to. In the Premier League, in particular, they seem to want the action to happen so they can do something. You know. And really, you got to stop the stuff before it happens. And Kaz was really nice, and keep control, or even don't need to have control if you can see what's happening. So know the game, and they've never played it. If they played the game, I would love to see more ex-professionals become referees, but they see how the referees are treated, and they don't want to be, do they?
So, exactly. Yeah. I'm going to finish up with just one little question there as well, just because it popped into my mind earlier on. Strategic partnership, Vissel Kobe and Aston Villa. If, let's say, is there still a massive boon of Japanese fans will flock towards a player that they like if he signs for a club in Europe? So, let's just say Taisei signs for Aston Villa. Will there be a noticeable uptake at Aston Villa fans just based on the fact that they will follow that player?
Certainly, if he starts getting some games, but even without games, even if he's on the bench or even in the crowd. Or are people allowed to go to Bodymore Heath? Can people go to training?
You can go to the gates, I think. Yeah,
because there will be. I mean, you see it. Koreans with Son at Tottenham Hotspur, and then Liverpool, Endo, and Brighton, Mitoma, because he plays most games. I mean, he's a star there. Villa should get him instead. Mitoma. I mean, they literally, and Germany. I mean, when we couldn't get Japanese players into the Premier League or into England because of the working visa situation, the players all went to Germany, and there were so many. I mean, it's like a plane full of Japanese going to each city. So there's dozens or even hundreds of players, fans that go. So it's really good now that they've changed the rules so that Japan is also in the top 20 of the FIFA ladder with, I mean, 14, I think 15, unbelievable. But deserved, I think. I mean, but certainly being in the top 20 has helped them also mean that players can go even extra places that they couldn't go before. But yeah, I see a lot of. In fact, I would be up for taking Japanese people to Birmingham on tour to see Taisei and see Birmingham City because they have two good players right now, and they'll be in the championship next year. I think Birmingham City because of the way they're playing, and they've got the big budget. But the two Japanese players they've got, in particular Iwata, who was playing for Celtic before, excellent player. So it'd be nice if I could take Japanese people to see three Japanese players in Birmingham.
And, you could throw a blanket over the two games,
show them the bull ring and whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be great. No, look, and I think that with Aston Villa's, the dreaded financial end of year statements, PSR, FFP and all that, all these things, look, we aren't averse to signing a player just for an FFP reason, so I would hate to say that Taisei might be that reason. But I think from what I've seen that there is an outside chance he could break into the team because he has the skills and the ability to do so. And I hope this one comes off. I hope this one does come off, based on like, what's the point in having a strategic agreement if you don't actually do anything with it between the two clubs, So it's the first time they have an opportunity to do business, and hopefully something comes of it, and hopefully we see something in the next few days. And this has been like, there's comments coming in here saying that this has been an all-timer of an episode, that this is really informative. This is brilliant. I know this started off as just basically a Taisei podcast. And I had in my mind expected maybe 20 minutes for this one, but I was just enjoying the chat so much. I will definitely be chatting to you again. Just, I suppose, realistically, even just on all things J-League, because we do stray into an awful lot of scouting in this podcast. And, I would love to get you back on to talk more about J-League players, what J-League players are hitting their heights, what J-League players, will be next to move to Europe and so on again. But I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this last hour. It's been really informative. You've been really great. And I can't thank you enough for your time. Thank you so much.
As I always say, the pleasure was all yours, I'm sure. But only an hour? It seemed like about 10 minutes to me. Well, if you've got a spare 4 or 5 hours in the future, I'm ready for talking about J-League.
Absolutely. I normally do have a spare 4 or 5 hours, just not today. But I really appreciate it. Guys, look, Alan has his jsoccer.com website. Go look on that as well. The J Soccer magazine as well. Yeah, there you go. Vissel Kobe 2023 champions. And I'm sure there'll be one.
Miyashiro.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, you can follow me at J Soccer Magazine and check out jsoccer.com. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing some of the listeners or watchers at Villa Park sometime very soon with Taisei. I'll be going along as his interpreter.
I'm going to make my business to get over there and meet you as well, because the man who brought Taisei, that's what we'll call you. But thanks so much for your time. Thanks a million to everybody as well that watched this. Really appreciate it. We will be back obviously with more podcasts as more news drops, and I think there's news just after dropping as well here in the last few minutes about Aston Villa. I don't know whether it's popped up on Twitter just yet, but I've gotten a DM about something. Whether it does happen or not, I don't know. I'm not going to break that live on this podcast, but we will see you again later. Thanks so much, everybody, for your time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks a million, Alan. Go follow jsoccer.com, and all that's left to say is up the Villa. There's my outro. I can never